Rain swept across the dueling grounds of Kethaler in hard, slanting sheets, turning the dark gray stone underfoot into a slick, glistening mirror. The sky above was the color of Bruce's angry violet, shot through with veins of silver lightning. Human mercenary pilot Riker Voss stood beneath the crooked overhang of a crumbling archway, arms folded tight across his chest as he tried to ignore the chill seeping into his jacket. He had landed on this planet for nothing more than a refuel, a stopover before the next contract. The storm had grounded his ship. Now he found himself watching something that felt older than the stone itself. A circle of violet-skinned warriors gathered around two combatants, their silver hair gleaming despite the gloom. The murmur of the crowd rose and fell in waves, their language half decoded by his implant, but their intent needed no translation. This was judgment. This was spectacle. One fighter moved with precision, despite her fatigue. She was smaller, leaner, the arcs of her blade still sharp, though her footing slipped now and then. The other a giant of a male whose 4 black and silver eyes gleamed like polished stone pressed her mercilessly, each swing of his sword crashing down with punishing weight. Riker tilted his head, tracking the rhythm. She was fast, graceful even, but slowing. The man wanted to crush her, and he was succeeding. Indigo blood striped her combat suit, where the silver-strapped fabric had torn. Her blade flickered faintly, runes glowing as if resisting the storm itself. Who are they? Riker asked the hunched elder beside him. The alien's silver-marked face tilted, his voice a gravelly rasp. The female is Larati Inverin, last daughter of a house that has all but fallen. The male is Drer Keth, champion of the Ascendant clan. This duel is a formality. Her family's lands are already lost. The elder's tone held no malice, only resignation. As if her fall was already written, a punishing strike sent Larati sprawling. The crowd roared its approval as her blade clattered from her grip and slid across the slick stone. She forced herself to rise, swaying, one knee trembling beneath her. Drer leveled his blade for the finishing stroke, his voice booming above the storm. "Yield, daughter of nothing. Your father's sword deserves a stronger hand." Larati spat blood and defiance. "I will die before I yield my family's honor." Something twisted in Riker's chest at that. He'd seen this story 100 times across a dozen worlds. The strong grinding the weak into dust, tradition wielded as a hammer against those who had no strength left. He should have turned away. He should have remembered the elder's warning. Outsider, leave. Instead, his boots splashed through the water-slick stone as he shoved into the circle, shoving past startled onlookers. Drer's blade came down, silver edge hungry for flesh. Riker's hand closed around the fallen sword. It was warm alive, somehow, and as the strike descended, he brought it up. Metal clashed with a thunderous ring that silenced the arena. The shock ran up his arm, rattling his teeth, but he held fast. Drer staggered back in surprise, 4 eyes narrowing. "This is not your fight, human." Riker squared his stance, the blade thrumming in his grip like a second heartbeat. "Seems unfair, killing someone already down." Larathi's voice reached him, sharp with something beyond pain. "You fool. Do you have any idea what you've done?" He didn't. Not until the elder pushed through the crowd, ceremonial robes trailing in the storm's spray. Others followed, their expressions a mix of outrage and grim amusement. "The blade has been claimed," the elder intoned, his voice carrying through the silence. "By ancient law, unbroken since the first dawn, he who wields a clan's sword in defense of its bearer is bound to that bearer in marriage." The word struck harder than any blade. Marriage. Riker blinked, rain dripping from his brow. What now?" The elder's gaze was merciless. "You are Larati Inverin's husband. The bond is sealed." Larathi's silver-flecked eyes burned as she looked at him, equal parts fury, disbelief, and something he could not name. The crowd murmured like a storm tide, hungry for the fallout. Riker had fought pirates, mercenaries, assassins. He had lived through the chaos of lawless frontiers. But nothing, not even the alien sky above, had prepared him for the truth. He had lifted a sword to save a stranger, and in doing so had bound his life to hers. The fortress loomed against the mountainside like a scar carved into the stone, its flanks wet with rain and glowing faintly from embedded veins of silver ore. Riker followed Larati through the heavy gates, the weight of 100 alien stairs still pressing on his back. The clan's ancestral stronghold smelled of iron and wet stone, and its halls whispered with echoes of boots and voices in a language his translator struggled to catch. Guards in ceremonial armor watched him with expressions ranging from suspicion to outright hostility. Their hands hovered near sword hilts, but none dared challenge him, not when the law itself had declared him bound. Larati moved ahead without hesitation, her silver hair plastered to her back, her injuries evident in the stiffness of her stride. Yet she did not falter. Pride held her upright when her body begged for rest. At one corner she paused, pressing a palm briefly to the wall, as though drawing strength from the stone itself. Riker caught the moment and frowned. He wanted to say something offer support, but the set of her shoulders warned him against pity. "You can't be serious about all that out there," Riker said finally, his voice rough in the narrow corridor. "Marriage? I picked up a blade. That's all. Where I come from, you don't tie lives together over an accident." Larati stopped. She turned sharply, her eyes catching the glow from the wall sconce's eyes that weren't the blank black orbs he had first thought, but galaxies alive with flecks of silver. "Accident?" Her voice was quiet, dangerous. "The Invar blade is no mere piece of steel. Forged in the blood of my ancestors across 16 generations, it carries their essence. When you raised it to shield me, it chose. That choice cannot be undone. It's a sword," Riker snapped back, rain still dripping from his hair. "An inanimate object." She stepped closer, her presence sharp as the storm outside. "The blade does not mistake worth. It recognized you as fit to continue my line. That is not accident. That is law. And law is all that keeps my clan from extinction." Her voice wavered at the end. A crack quickly smoothed away. Riker dragged a hand through his short brown hair. He wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but the gravity in her eyes stopped him. "Where I come from, marriage means choice, consent, dinner, maybe a drink, at the very least a first date. Where you come from is irrelevant," Larati said flatly. "Here, the blade chose. And so you are mine, as I am yours, until death or dishonor severs the bond." He stared at her, struck by the mixture of steel and desperation in her words. She was no willing bride. She was a soldier clinging to survival by the edge of a tradition she both resented and relied on. He understood that more than he wanted to admit. He had lived his life on the run, scraping by on contracts and instinct. But now, somehow, he was the lifeline for a woman he had never met before tonight. They reached a set of massive doors banded with silver, guarded by warriors who looked at him as if he were already guilty. One guard sneered. "The elders await," he said in clipped tones. His disdain was as sharp as any blade. The chamber beyond was circular, a cathedral of stone lit by veins of crystal that revealed the storm still raging, through a domed ceiling of translucent panels. 7 elders sat in a semicircle, robes heavy with age, their silver markings intricate as maps across their violet faces. At their center was a woman whose hair was so long it pooled like a river around her feet. She lifted a gnarled hand, commanding silence even from the storm. "Daughter of Invar," the elder said. "Approach. Bring the one who has claimed the blade." Larati squared her shoulders, concealing her weariness with dignity. She bowed low, then stepped forward with Riker at her side. He felt like a fraud in his scuffed boots and worn jacket, standing before beings who carried centuries in their gaze. "I present Riker Voss of Earth," Larati said, her voice formal, strong. "A human." The High Elder's tone dripped disdain. "You bring an outsider before the sacred circle and claim him as bondmate?" "I claim nothing," Larati replied, fire in her eyes. The blade chose. The chamber erupted in murmurs, some shocked, some amused. One elder leaned forward, silver lines gleaming. "Unprecedented. No outsider has ever wielded a clan blade, perhaps because no outsider was ever foolish enough to interfere in clan matters." Another snapped. The High Elder raised her hand for silence. "The law is clear. If the blade accepted his touch in your defense, the bond is formed." Yet, her gaze shifted to Riker, sharp as a blade itself. "The question is whether this human understands what he has committed himself to." Riker swallowed. His mouth was dry, but his voice was steady. "With respect, I don't. I saw someone about to be killed, and I acted. Where I come from, that's called decency." The High Elder tilted her head as though testing a foreign flavor. "Decency. An interesting concept. Yet the blade does not honor decency. It honors strength, honor, and bloodline compatibility. And you, human, have all but declared yourself unready." Before Riker could answer, the heavy doors slammed open. Drer Keth entered, his massive frame flanked by armored warriors. His voice boomed across the chamber like thunder. "This farce has gone on long enough. The duel was not finished. The human is no husband. He is an interloper who must be cast out." Riker tensed, instinct driving his hand toward the hilt of the blade, still at his side. The storm outside rattled the crystal ceiling, as though the world itself awaited the verdict. The fortress rang with the storm's echo, thunder rolling through the stone halls, as if the mountain itself growled in warning. Riker stood beside Larati, jaw clenched, while Drer's accusations rattled through the council chamber. The elders spoke among themselves in sharp bursts of Kethalarian, their voices blending with the pounding rain overhead. Finally, the High Elder raised her hand, her silver-marked skin catching the dim crystal light. "The law is unbroken," she said. "Yet Drer's challenge holds weight. The bond must be tested." Her gaze shifted to Riker, cold and unyielding. "Human, you will have one full cycle of our moons to prove yourself as husband to Clan Invar. Fail, and the bond dissolves. Your life may be spared, but her clan will be forfeit." The words settled like stones in Riker's chest. One cycle barely 28 Earth days to master customs, traditions, and skills carved into these people across lifetimes. Dreyer's smirk told him the rival champion expected failure, maybe even prayed for it. Larathi's fingers brushed his wrist, a small touch, almost imperceptible, but it steadied him more than he would admit. When the session adjourned, she led him down twisting corridors into a chamber filled with weapons and training mats. The air smelled of sweat and steel. Torches flickered against the walls, illuminating racks of curved blades, spears, and staffs. "If you are to survive even a moon," she said without preamble, "you must begin now." Riker tossed his damp jacket aside and eyed the arsenal. "I've fought pirates, merc squads, even a corporate assassin once. I know my way around a fight." Her stare was ice. "You've never fought like a Keth. Our trials measure more than brute force, body, mind, spirit. You must be judged in all three." He raised an eyebrow. "Body, mind, spirit. Sounds like a recruitment pamphlet. Sounds like survival," she corrected, and with a flick of her hand, tossed him a weighted practice sword. It nearly pulled his shoulder from its socket. First lesson: strength without balance is death. Hours blurred into sweat, bruises, and repetition. Larati circled him with merciless precision, striking without warning. His parries were sloppy, his stance uneven, his breathing ragged. Each failure drew her curt correction. Lower your center. Bend your knees. Do not fight the blade, become it. By the 4th hour, his arms shook. By the 5th, he collapsed onto the mats, chest heaving. On Earth, he gasped, we have this concept called taking a break. Larati paused, her violet skin glistening with exertion, her silver hair damp at the temples. For the first time, her expression softened. Breaks are for those who can afford them. My clan cannot. She set her practice blade aside and sat opposite him, the firelight casting shadows across her sharp features. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the storm's fading growl. Finally, Riker asked, "What's this all really about? Why risk your life in that duel when you knew the odds?" Her eyes lowered, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of years. My father was poisoned. My allies scattered. Drare seized our lands piece by piece. That duel was my last chance to defend the honor of my bloodline. I expected to die. Instead, you interfered. Her gaze lifted, steady and piercing. Now, for better or worse, we share this burden. Riker leaned back on his elbows, rain still dripping faintly from the ceiling onto the stone. He had wanted nothing more than to fuel his ship and disappear into the stars. Instead, he found himself bound to a dying clan and a woman who stared at him as if he were both curse and salvation. Knock rattled the chamber door. A young messenger slipped inside, breathless. "Honored Larati," she said, bowing quickly. "The Council of 3 Clans has convened ahead of schedule. Clan Keth demands judgment on the outsider before the moon's cycle is complete." Larithi's jaw tightened. She looked to Riker, eyes dark with warning. "Drare makes his move. He will try to end this before you can learn enough to stand." Riker pushed himself upright, bruised, exhausted, but a flicker of defiance lit his grin. "Then I guess we better make the crash course count." The storm outside rumbled again, as though the world itself agreed. The arena was carved into the mountain itself, a ring of graystone open to the skies where the storm had finally broken. Mist still clung to the cliffs, curling in pale ribbons across the stands. Hundreds of Kethalarians filled the tiers, their violet faces intent, silver hair gleaming under the first rays of dawn. The scent of wet stone and charged air lingered, heavy with anticipation. No outsider had ever stood where Riker Vos now stood, and the weight of that truth pressed on his shoulders like armor. He adjusted the bracers Larati had fitted to his arms. The purple fabric of his modified battle attire stretched over his broader human frame. The sigils of Clan Invar faded, but still etched in silver ran across his chest. He rolled his shoulders, trying to shake out the ache from days of relentless training. Beside him, Larithi's hand lingered a heartbeat too long on the strap of his gauntlet. Her voice was low, steady, though her eyes betrayed her tension. "Remember what I told you. They expect brute force. Surprise them." Riker gave her a tired grin. "Yeah, headbutts and bar fights. My specialty." A horn blast silenced the arena. From the opposite archway, Drare emerged like a thundercloud, flanked by his chosen champion. Kororax was massive even by Keth standards, a warrior wrapped in crimson armor that caught the light like molten ore. 4 eyes glinted as he surveyed Riker, the tips of his fangs bared in what might have been amusement. His voice, when it came, was melodic despite his size. "I have never fought a human before," he said, each word carrying easily across the arena. "They say your kind bleeds red. I look forward to seeing it." Riker raised his practiced sword, the Invar blade. Itself was too sacred for trials, and settled into the stance Larati had drilled into him until his legs shook from exhaustion. "Happy to disappoint you." The horn sounded again. Kororax moved like lightning, his blade flashing in a blur of arcs. Riker's arms jarred with the first impact, his ribs screaming as a second blow slipped past his guard. A shallow cut welled crimson across his side, and the crowd roared at the sight of human blood. Dreyer's voice rang out from the stands. "First blood to Keth." Riker staggered back, breath harsh, vision swimming. Larithi's words echoed in his head. Don't fight their fight. Adapt. He forced his stance lower, looser, his mercenary instincts taking over. When Kororax lunged again, Riker didn't parry. He stepped inside the swing, letting the blade scrape his shoulder in exchange for leverage. He slammed his forehead into the bridge of Kororax's nose with a crack that echoed. The arena gasped. Outrage erupted from Clan Keth's section, shouts of dishonor, rising like a tide. The High Elder's voice cut through the clamor. Unconventional, but within the rules. Kororax reeled, violet blood streaming, then steadied, 4 eyes blazing with new fire. So, humans fight with their skulls. Interesting. Respect laced the words, grudging but real. The duel stretched on, sweat and blood mixing, as steel rang against steel. Kororax's speed was otherworldly, but Riker fought with stubborn unpredictability. A feint that turned into a shove. A parry that collapsed into a grapple. He fought like a man who had survived alleys and boarding raids, not academies. Cuts opened across his arms and legs, but he pressed on, fueled by Larithi's steady gaze in the crowd. At last Kororax launched a flurry that should have overwhelmed him. Instead, Riker ducked low, dropped his sword, and seized the champion's wrist with both hands. Using raw leverage and momentum, he flipped the giant over his shoulder. Kororax crashed to the stone with a force that made the stands tremble. Before he could recover, Riker snatched up his blade and pressed it to the warrior's throat. "Yield," he panted out for a long moment. Kororax's 4 eyes locked with his. Then, to the shock of the crowd, the champion smiled. "I yield to the bond husband of Invar." The silence shattered into a roar, half disbelief, half reluctant awe. Riker offered a hand, pulling the warrior to his feet, and Kororax accepted with a nod of respect. On the dais, Dreyer's expression curdled into fury, his fists white-knuckled on the council table. The High Elder raised her voice. "The first trial is complete. Riker Voss has proven his physical worthiness." Riker stumbled toward the edge of the arena, exhaustion flooding him now that the adrenaline had ebbed. Larati was there, steadying him before he collapsed. Her touch was gentle but firm, her eyes bright with something he hadn't seen before, pride. "That," she said quietly, "was completely improvised." He managed a crooked grin. "You noticed." Her lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. "Perhaps the blade knew more than we did." The storm had passed, but Riker felt another brewing inside the council, inside the clans, and inside himself. He had won one battle. The trials of mind and spirit still loomed like mountains ahead, and for the first time, he realized he wanted to climb them, not just for his own survival, but for the fierce, impossible woman at his side. The chamber for the second trial was nothing like the combat arena. Where stone and storm had ruled the first challenge, here everything was hushed and deliberate. Riker stood inside a circular hall whose walls were lined with shelves of crystalline tablets, each etched with the spiraling script of the Keth. Light refracted through them in soft blues and silvers, filling the air with a solemn glow. At the center, a long table carved from a single slab of obsidian waited, and around it sat the 3 clan representatives Invar, Keth, and Thal. The High Elder presided once more, her long hair pooling like a silver river on the polished floor. Larati stood just behind Riker, her posture straight, despite the lingering strain of her wounds. She leaned close enough that her whisper brushed his ear. "This will not be a fight of blades. They will question you our laws, our histories, our strategies. Answer wrongly, and they will strip the bond from you. They expect you to fail. Riker's throat was dry. He had been through ambushes, sieges, and orbital crossfire, but this was another battlefield entirely. He wasn't a scholar. He wasn't bred to recite clan histories stretching back millennia. What he had was instinct, and a stubborn refusal to back down. He squared his shoulders. Guess I'll just have to improvise again. The High Elder lifted her hand. The second trial begins. Human, we will test your mind. If you are to claim kinship with our blood, you must prove you can guide, not only fight. An elder from Clan Keth sneered as he unrolled a scroll. In the Fifth Border War, when the clans faced extermination, what strategy preserved the Invar mines from collapse? His 4 eyes glittered, daring Riker to stumble. Riker hesitated. The names and wars blurred from Larathi's lessons. But he remembered one detail she had muttered while correcting his footwork days ago. Her father had forged alliances, not walls. He met the Elder's gaze. They didn't preserve them alone. They built alliances, trade, supply, mutual defense. Strength wasn't hoarded. It was shared. A murmur rippled through the council. The Thal representative, serene and sharp-eyed, inclined her head slightly. Dreher scowled, his lips pulled tight. Another elder spoke, his tone clipped. If 2 clans vie for dominance over neutral ground, what is the honorable resolution? Riker leaned forward, choosing his words carefully. You fight a duel, or a war. That's what you expect me to say. But honor isn't only about winning, it's about what survives after. Where I come from, real honor is making sure the people under you aren't ground into dust by tradition. You negotiate, you compromise. You find a way where both sides live to fight another day. The hall went very still. The Keth elders hissed, muttering about weakness. But others, especially among the Thal, nodded slowly, as though his outsider perspective rang with the truth they had buried. Dreher rose from his seat, voice booming. You twist our traditions with alien words. He knows nothing of us. Riker met his fury head-on. Maybe not, but maybe that's the point. I'm not here to be another Dreher. I'm here because her blade decided something in me mattered, and because Larathi deserves someone who'll fight for her, not just the land she stands on. Silence followed, heavy and electric. The High Elder's expression softened almost imperceptibly. This trial is complete. The human has answered with thought unorthodox, yet true to the blade's choosing. He has passed the trial of mind. A mixture of gasps and applause swept through the chamber. Larathi's hand brushed Riker's arm, the briefest of touches, but her eyes glowed with pride. For the first time since the bond had been declared, her gaze held something more than duty. It held belief. Dreher's fists clenched, his jaw rigid. Let him enjoy his small victory. The trial of spirit will break him. Riker exhaled, his heart pounding. He'd survived another round, but he knew Dreher wasn't wrong. Whatever came next would be beyond steel or words. And that terrified him more than any blade. The chamber of the final trial lay deep within the fortress, beyond gates banded with silver and corridors that narrowed into darkness. Torches sputtered against damp stone, their flames bending toward a vast door, engraved with runes that pulsed faintly as Riker approached. Larathi walked beside him, her steps measured, but her hand pressed tight against her side, where her wounds still pulled. Guards flanked the entrance, but neither spoke. The High Elder's voice carried from within, solemn and unyielding. Enter, human. The trial of spirit awaits. Riker exhaled slowly. He had bled for these people. He had stood before their council and refused to bend. But this was something no training, no battlefield could have prepared him for. Larathi's hand brushed his wrist. Her eyes, storm-dark and flecked with silver, locked on his. Inside lies the communion of my ancestors. No one may walk with you. Whatever you see, whatever you face, you will face alone. But remember, the blade chose you. It was not without reason. He managed a crooked smile. You always know how to give a pep talk. Then the doors opened, and the world beyond them swallowed him. The chamber was circular, domed high above, its ceiling lost in shadows. In the center, on a raised pedestal, rested the Invar blade itself. No practice weapon this time, the true sword, its silver engravings alive with inner light. As Riker stepped forward, the glow intensified until it filled the chamber with a blue radiance that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat, not his own. He reached out, fingers brushing the hilt. The moment his skin touched the metal, the world dissolved. He stood in a place of stars and storm, groundless yet solid, airless yet alive. Shapes emerged, figures tall and proud, their silver hair flowing like banners. Eyes the same midnight black with silver sparks he'd seen in Larathes. Voices whispered in a tongue his translator could not grasp, but meaning poured into him all the same. Judgment, remembrance, expectation. One figure stepped forward. A man broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his cheek. His presence thrummed with authority, with grief and strength interwoven. Riker knew without being told. This was Thean Ingar, Larathes' father. The spectral warrior spoke, his voice echoing through Riker's bones. You are no son of Kephaler. Yet you stood where others faltered. You raised our blade, not for conquest, but for another's life. That choice carries weight. Do you understand the burden you claim? Riker swallowed hard. I didn't come here to claim anything. I saw someone about to die, and I couldn't stand by. That's all. Thean's expression softened, just slightly. The heart that acts without thought for gain is rare. Our line has always prized skill, honor, strength. But perhaps what we needed most was heart. The figures around him bowed their heads. The blade in Riker's hand burned not painfully, but with a warmth that spread through his chest, searing away doubt, leaving only clarity. The engravings shimmered, reshaping before his eyes. Where once only Kephalarian sigils danced, now new patterns wove themselves in lines and arcs echoing human script. Binding two lineages into one, the chamber shifted again, and Riker found himself on his knees before the pedestal, the blade glowing in his grip. Sweat dripped down his face, his breath ragged, but he was alive. More than alive, he was changed. The doors opened, and Larati rushed forward, eyes wide. What happened? She demanded, voice trembling with awe. The blade has never done this before. Riker pushed himself upright, still gripping the transformed sword. Its glow painted Larathes' face in shades of blue, highlighting the fierce lines of a warrior and the fragile traces of a daughter who had lost everything. He met her gaze, words stumbling out raw. I saw them. Your ancestors. Your father. He said, your line values heart above all else. Her breath caught. For the first time since he'd met her, tears welled in her eyes. My father spoke to you? Riker reached for her hand. And I think I finally understand why the blade chose me. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything they hadn't said. Then Larati stepped closer, so close he could feel the warmth of her breath, the tremor in her body. Her silver hair slipped free from its braids, cascading around her shoulders. In the glow of the ancestral sword, she looked both untouchable and utterly human. I did not choose this bond, she whispered, voice breaking. But standing here now, I wonder if I would have had I known you then. Riker's thumb brushed over her knuckles. Maybe that's exactly why the blade brought us together. Because sometimes choice comes after. Her lips trembled, then pressed against his. The kiss was tentative, cautious, but when it deepened, it burned with the fire of battle survived, and truths finally spoken. Around them, the blade pulsed with soft light, as if the ancestors themselves gave blessing to the union. When they broke apart, Lerati rested her forehead against his, her voice a whisper of wonder. Perhaps the blade was right after all. The fortress was restless. Word of the blade's transformation had spread like fire through dry brush, carrying whispers from kitchen halls to council chambers. Some called it a miracle, others an omen. Riker felt every eye on him as he walked the corridors, now alien gazes measuring, doubting, fearing. But in Laerthi's presence, the weight of those stares lessened. She moved at his side no longer with wary distance, but with a quiet certainty that spoke of something chosen, not forced. It was in her private chambers, weeks after the trial of spirit, that she first told him. The rain had broken, leaving the air crisp, the mountain peaks dusted in pale snow. She stood at the window, a hand resting lightly on her abdomen, silver hair unbound around her shoulders. Riker rose from the bed, shirt half buttoned, sensing the shift in her breathing before she spoke. "Something has changed," she murmured, her voice unsteady. "The healers have confirmed it. Our bond. It has borne fruit." He froze. For a moment, the words meant nothing, then struck with the force of a shockwave. "You're saying?" Lerati turned, her eyes wide and luminous. "Yes, I carry your child." Our child? The silence between them seemed to stretch forever. Riker's life had been drift, mercenary contracts, never roots. He had never once imagined fatherhood. And yet the truth hit him with the clarity of the blade's communion. This was real. He crossed the room in 2 strides, taking her hands in his. Are you all right with this?" Her lips curved in something fragile, almost disbelief. "There has never been a union of our kind. The healers feared impossibility. But the child grows strong. He is unprecedented." A laugh broke from him, raw and choked, as he pressed his forehead to hers. "Then so are we." But their joy was short-lived. The council chamber filled again, Dreher striding forward with a scroll clutched in his clawed hands. His voice boomed, dripping with venom. "An abomination? A half-blood, born of alien corruption. Do you not see the danger? This will unravel all we are." He slammed the scroll open, brandishing it. "The ancient archives speak of this. Blood from beyond the stars mingled with the first clans heralding dissolution." Murmurs swelled like thunder. The High Elder demanded the scroll, eyes scanning the brittle text. Her expression shifted. "You quote half a truth, Dreher. The full passage speaks not of dissolution, but of unity. In this child's hands, the blades of many houses shall become one, and a new age shall dawn." The uproar shook the hall. Dreher's face twisted, rage barely masked. "You twist words to favor them. This is blasphemy." Before argument could ignite into chaos, a sound cut through the chamber. Laerthi's gasp. She doubled over, one hand clutching her stomach. Riker was at her side instantly, catching her as she whispered, "The child." "He comes." The council scattered in confusion as Riker carried her, heart hammering, to the birthing chamber. Hours blurred into sweat and pain, Laerthi's grip crushing his hand as she fought with a warrior's endurance. When the cry finally rose, a newborn's cry, echoing against ancient stone, Riker felt his chest split open with awe. The healers laid the child in Laerthi's arms. His skin was a pale violet, tinged with human pink. Wisps of silver-white hair crowned his head. His eyes, when they opened briefly, were unmistakably human in structure, yet flecked with silver sparks that shimmered like the stars. Laerthi's voice broke, soft as falling rain. "Theon, after my father." Riker touched the child's tiny fingers, which curled around his. "Theon Riker Invar, our son." The doors burst open. Kororak stumbled in, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "Dreher moves now," he warned, breathless. He demands the child be seized. But know this, I stand with Ingvar. Others do too. Behind him, warriors gathered, not only of Ingvar, but Thal, and even some who bore the crimson sigils of Keth, defying their own champion. Moments later, Dreher himself appeared in the corridor, his voice bellowing, demanding the child be surrendered. Riker stood before the door, blade in hand. You'll go through me first. And then Larati, still weak from the birth, rose to her feet. Theon in her arms, her hair damp with sweat, her eyes unflinching. No, you will go through us. The standoff cracked. Warriors who once cowered behind Dreher turned away. The High Elder arrived, her presence silencing even the fury in Dreher's throat. The prophecy is clear, she said. The child is not abomination, but heir. You may resist Dreher, but you will stand alone. Defeated, Dreher lowered his blade. His power broke not with steel, but with the cry of a newborn and the unity of those who chose to believe. When the storm of politics and prophecy had quieted, Riker stood with Lyrati and Theon on a balcony overlooking Kethler's twin moons. The child slept in his mother's arms, silver hair catching the light. For the first time in his wandering life, Riker Voss felt something he had never dared claim: belonging. He had come to Kethler a drifter, seeking fuel and escape. He had lifted a sword to save a stranger. And in doing so, he had found a clan, a wife, and a son who might one day heal a fractured world. Some destinies were written in stars. Others were written the moment a man chose not to walk away.